Iran missiles intercepted. Japan quake kills 13. Wildfires rage in Europe. And Peru's Fujimori is sworn in. Greetings, humanity. Let's GROK the news. We cover the world's headlines, but first, a deep dive into the most important story in the world today, right after you like and subscribe. Dateline, Washington, D.C. The United States military says it successfully intercepted a barrage of ballistic missiles launched by Iran against American forces in the Middle East on Tuesday, describing the action as an attempted surprise attack. At the same time, U.S. and Saudi Arabian fighter aircraft carried out precision strikes on multiple logistics and weapons sites used by Iran-aligned groups in eastern Iraq. U.S. Central Command, known as CENTCOM, reported that Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps fired the missiles toward U.S. positions, including a base in Jordan. All of the incoming missiles were destroyed in the air by American and Jordanian defenses. Officials said there were no casualties and no damage to facilities. CENTCOM stressed that U.S. forces remain at a high state of readiness across the region. Separately, CENTCOM announced that American and Saudi warplanes struck several terrorist logistics and weapons sites in eastern Iraq. The joint operation responded to more than 30 aerial drone attacks directed by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps over the previous 72 hours. These drones had targeted U.S. forces and Saudi infrastructure. The U.S. military said that the earlier attacks on American personnel were not successful. Saudi Arabia confirmed its participation. The kingdom's defense ministry stated that its aircraft hit targets belonging to militias linked to recent attacks on Saudi oil facilities. Iraqi Popular Mobilization Forces, an umbrella of groups aligned with Iran, reported that the strikes killed at least 20 of its fighters and wounded more than 30 others across several provinces. The Iraqi groups condemned this action, of course, as a violation of sovereignty. Well, they had the sovereignty to strike at you. No, that means no one can strike at them. According to that definition, Iraq's prime minister convened an emergency security meeting in response. The sequence of events broke a brief pause in fighting that had allowed mediators to explore renewed talks. At this point, this observer has to say, I told you so, and I know that the people in charge here in America and Israel knew very well that Iran was not going to keep their word. They never have in the last 47 years. President Donald Trump had met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House at around the same time. The Iranian missile launch marked the first ballistic missile attack on a U.S. base in the region since a temporary halt in American strikes earlier in the week. CENTCOM warned that the Revolutionary Guard and its proxies must stop the attacks or face further U.S. military response. This observer wonders how long this tit-for-tat childish game is going to go on before we finally lose patience. Saudi forces had also intercepted additional drones launched from Iraqi territory aimed at petroleum facilities in the kingdom's eastern region for a second consecutive day. Iranian state media and the Revolutionary Guard described their missile fire as retaliation. For what? The developments come amid a wider conflict that began earlier this year with U.S. and Israeli strikes inside Iran. Shipping through key waterways has faced repeated disruptions, and regional partners, including Jordan, have actively participated in intercepting the threats. U.S. officials speaking on condition of anonymity, here we go, said that the Iranian missile attack and the subsequent U.S.-Saudi strikes in Iraq were not directly connected in timing, though both reflected rising tensions. Oil markets reacted quickly to the news of renewed exchanges, as they have every single time someone has pulled a trigger in this conflict. Analysts noted that any sustained escalation risks further pressure on global energy supplies already strained by earlier phases of the conflict. American commanders emphasized defensive readiness while underscoring the precision nature of the strikes against specific logistics nodes that are used by the militias. Iraqi authorities continue to assess damage and casualties on the ground. Well, shame on you, Iraq. You know what happens when America loses its patience. The Popular Mobilization Forces claimed that facilities in 7 provinces were hit. Washington has repeatedly stated that its actions target only those groups directed by the Revolutionary Guard to attack American and partner interests. Riyadh framed its role as necessary self-defense against repeated drone threats to critical infrastructure. As of early Wednesday, no further missile launches or major strikes had been publicly confirmed. CENTCOM said that forces remain vigilant. Diplomats from several countries are monitoring the situation closely for signs of whether the latest exchanges will lead to broader escalation or a return to negotiations. The United States continues to coordinate closely with Saudi Arabia and other regional partners on both defensive and responsive measures. Once again, and I guess I'll get tired of saying it about the time that America gets tired of playing games with this regime, there is no negotiating with a striking viper. You run away from it or you kill it. I'm Robert Gardner, using GROK each weekday to truthfully summarize the news, and I serve it up with my opinion. We review a roundup of the most critical reports in the world right after this. God with Us, the story of Jesus, blends the Gospels into one inspired narrative. Divided into daily Bible studies, this book presents the story of Jesus from his birth to his ascension. So find God with Us by yours truly, Robert Gardner, at Amazon.com. Now we grok the news with headlines from around the world. Dateline: Kumamoto, Japan. A powerful magnitude 7.1 earthquake struck southern Japan's Kumamoto prefecture, killing at least 13 people now, injuring hundreds more. The quake triggered a gas explosion at a shopping mall, collapsed buildings, ruptured roads, and cut power to tens of thousands of homes. Rescuers continue searching for survivors amid ongoing aftershocks as Prime Minister Sanaya Takaichi has updated the national toll. Dateline: Bordeaux, France. Massive wildfires driven by extreme heat and drought continue to ravage southwestern France and areas of Spain, forcing more than 300,000 people from their homes in one of Europe's largest evacuation operations in recent decades. French President Emmanuel Macron called the situation the toughest since World War II. European Union aircraft and firefighters from multiple nations are assisting exhausted local crews as another heat wave approaches. Dateline: Washington, D.C. President Donald Trump delivered a personal eulogy at the funeral of Senator Lindsey Graham at Washington National Cathedral, calling the late South Carolina Republican a true American original and a beloved friend. High-ranking officials, including Vice President J.D. Vance, attended the service for the longtime senator, who died earlier this month at the age of 71 after decades of influence in foreign policies and national security debates. Dateline: Lima, Peru. Keiko Fujimori was just sworn in as Peru's president, becoming the nation's first woman elected by popular vote in this cycle. The 51-year-old conservative, the daughter of former President Alberto Fujimori, has pledged an iron-fist approach to crime, extortion, and illegal mining, while seeking stronger ties with the United States after her narrow runoff victory. Peru could use an iron lady right now. God bless them all. Dateline: New Bern, North Carolina. Former FBI Director James Comey asked a federal judge to dismiss charges, accusing him of making threats against President Donald Trump. The incident stems from a 2025 Instagram post showing seashells arranged to read 8647. Comey's team argues that the post is protected free speech under the First Amendment, and does not meet the legal standard for a true threat. Just for a former FBI director to call for the President of the United States to be 86th. Restaurant talk for remove it from the menu. Mafia talk for kill the target. And we're supposed to believe that Comey didn't know that. Dateline Washington, we're supposed to believe a man who was the foremost leader of America's foremost investigative law enforcement team, we're supposed to believe he didn't know that. Well, that's just how dumb they think we are. We're not that dumb. Are we? Dateline, Washington, D.C. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement is advancing plans to open 4 new detention facilities that would add space for approximately 5,500 detainees. The expansion comes as federal authorities increase enforcement operations, including reported arrests at airports, amid ongoing debates over border security and immigration capacity nationwide. Dateline Kiev. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky continues adjusting military leadership following recent protests, while Ukrainian forces press drone strikes against Russian targets. Russia and Ukraine traded further attacks, killing civilians on both sides in recent days. Zelensky met with President Trump in Washington as Kiev seeks still more air defense support against intensified Russian assaults. Again, this observer will mention his opinion that this was the most unnecessary war of the 21st century. Dateline New Delhi. Indian security forces used tear gas and batons to disperse largely peaceful student and youth protests marching in the capital over education system grievances. Rights groups, including Human Rights Watch, criticized the response and temporary internet suspensions. The demonstrations were organized by a Gen Z movement known as the Cockroach Janta Party after controversial official remarks about unemployed youth. If this is anything like America's mostly peaceful protests and America's Gen Z political movements, stomp on these cockroaches. I don't know what to say. Hopefully they're not the same as what we face over here with Antifa, but it feels like it, doesn't it? Dateline Kaduna, Nigeria. Clashes in southern Kaduna left approximately 30 people dead and forced residents to flee their homes, according to local reports. The violence adds to broader political tensions as southern leaders call for the president to remain in the south, and authorities discuss police reforms amid recurring security challenges across multiple states. Dateline Minneapolis. A cyber attack disrupted operations at more than 30 water systems across Minnesota, prompting state and federal investigators to assess the scope and origin of the incident. Officials are working to restore full service and determine whether critical infrastructure beyond water treatment was affected in the coordinated digital assault. Dateline Denver. Colorado residents are increasingly reporting neighbors for excessive water use as severe drought conditions tighten restrictions across the Front Range. Local authorities face rising complaints and disputes over lawn care and outdoor watering limits, while the region endures prolonged dry weather and strained reservoir levels. Dateline Atlanta. A teenager was sentenced to life in prison without parole for the deadly shooting at Appalachia High School in Georgia that killed 4 people. The court imposed the maximum penalty available after the young perpetrator was convicted in the attack that shocked the community and reignited national discussions on school safety. This observer says what many have said about school safety and people using firearms. Don't make the schools a target-rich environment where no one can protect themselves. Post armed guards like you would at a bank. The children are more precious than your money, aren't they? Dateline Fort Worth, Texas. American Airlines resumed normal operations after a brief information technology outage caused a nationwide ground stop affecting flights across the United States. The disruption lasted a short time before systems were restored and aircraft began departing again, with limited residual delays reported at the major hubs. Dateline Islamabad. Fresh clashes erupted in Pakistan-administered Kashmir on the first day of a contested vote, according to regional reports. Violence accompanied the polling as local tension remains high over the electoral process and broader political disputes affecting the disputed territory claimed by both Pakistan and India. Dateline Jakarta. Indonesia continues traditional small-scale oil drilling in regions sometimes called Little Texas, while navigating complex economic ties with China. Officials weigh shifting priorities away from raw material exports against deep, existing interdependence with Beijing. That has shaped infrastructure and investment flows across the archipelago. Dateline Nairobi. Kenyan President William Ruto has conducted outreach in the Mount Kenya region aimed at rebuilding political alliances. Local newspapers highlighted the effort alongside other domestic issues, including election verification processes and technology partnership events, as the government seeks broader support bases. Dateline Accra. Ghana has marked the 14th anniversary of the death of former President John Evans Atta Mills, with tributes from political figures, including current leaders who described him as a mentor. Ceremonies coincided with other national updates on social surveys and judicial milestones reported across local media. And Dateline Los Angeles. Federal investigators in California are examining companies linked to Mark Walter, owner of the Los Angeles Dodgers and Lakers, in connection with possible loan fraud. Separate FBI raids targeted a San Bernardino County supervisor, an Ontario councilman, a lawyer, and a media firm in related California enforcement actions this week. I thank you for listening. Please join me tomorrow to once again grok the news. I'm Robert Gardner. Godspeed and God bless.